In this module, what I want to do is demonstrate the power that a discipline like psychiatry can have. Now, it's very easy to think about when it's theorizing about mental illnesses and mental diseases. It's very easy to imagine that it's just in the ideal sphere, that it is thinking about stuff, but it doesn't have a specific impact upon society. Well, of course it has an impact on treatment, there's no doubt about that. But what about wider society? What are the impacts there in terms of the way that the mind and mental illness and types of people are constructed by psychiatry? What kind of power does it have? And this is going to be another theme that threads through the whole subject. And in this case study, I want to look at a particular kind of making person uppishness, if that's a way of speaking. Actually, probably not. I've taken making people up as a phrase from the great philosopher and historian Ian Hacking. In this one, I specifically want to look at the way that psychiatry overlapped with constructing notions of criminality. The idea of habitual criminals had been around for ages. People could see things like often crime would run in families, those kind of things. So there was already a sense in which, at least culturally, at least socially, habitual criminals were out there in society. But with the advent of Darwinian theory and other evolutionary models, a biological element was added to this that was expressed most strongly through psychiatry itself. What I want to look at here is the work of Cesare Lombroso, L'uomo delinquente, published in 1876, where he argues that crime is hereditary, that it is actually pathological. Now, Lombroso himself, anthropologist, criminologist, but also critically a psychiatrist, was arguing that in a way crime was a form of sickness. And like any sickness, like any disease, there are somatic symptoms that can be observed by looking at the body, by looking at the face, by looking at the shape of the skull. And here we see some of the faces of degeneration that can be found in Lombroso's book, which was eventually translated into English, had a great deal of impact on the thinking of people like Havelock Ellis, writing their own criminological tracts at the end of the 19th century. I'm always intrigued by the fact that one of the signs that Lombroso looked at, one of the symptoms of the pathological nature of criminality, was tattoos. He'd go around prisons and he would see the extent to which the prisoners were tattooed. He'd see the kind of things that they were tattooed with. And there are these incredible illustrations, one of which you can see here, which are in L'uomo delinquente, criminal man. Now, the interesting thing about the tattoos is that he didn't believe that this was a cultural phenomenon. He believed that it was a sign of the pathological state of criminal man. It's worth looking at in more detail at his ideas about tattoos. Lombroso and his followers believed that only the insensible could tolerate the pain of the operation. Only people that had degenerate nervous systems and degenerate minds would be capable of undergoing the pain of being tattooed in this or indeed in any other way. So these images, many of which are about love, some are about sex, some are about martial spirit, some are just cultural depictions of everyday life. Lombroso was able to look at these and say, well, actually, what these indicate is a criminal mind. Now, tattoos were originally recorded on criminal records for ID purposes, identity purposes. So, for example, when you look at the records of convict transportation, you find these kind of descriptions in there. What can we see here? 3 moles on front of neck, sportsman dog, and 2 birds. You can see a whole description of the tattoos that were on this guy's body. Now, that recording was purely done not to criminalise, but to say identify the individual if they should run away, because at the time there is no photography available to capture the image of the convict. Sometimes tattoos would be identified as part of the secret signs of the criminal underworld. We see this in the 1850s when Henry Mayhew, who wrote Life and Labour in London, a very celebrated early work of anthropology and sociology, which looked at the life of ordinary Londoners and also the underworld of London. When Mayhew went into the prisons, he was asking the governor why some of the prisoners had the 5 stars tattooed around their thumb area. And the governor turned around to him and said, oh, that's the sign of 40, the 40 thieves. It's a gang that they all belong to. So there was a belief that somehow there was a semiotics of criminality expressed in them. By the way, this is a bit of a random image up here, but I believe that's actually a piece of skin. I know, for example, that the Science Museum has a huge collection of skin that has tattoos on it. Don't know how they got hold of it. Maybe it was post-mortem of people dying in prisons or dying in asylums or workhouses with their bodies unclaimed. I just cannot actually tell how they got hold of this material. But it's only when evolution and psychiatry mix that they become a pathological sign of the biologically criminal. And what I'd like to suggest is once you bring biology into the equation, it becomes incredibly hardened. Suddenly you have got a looping effect where to be a criminal is to also be biologically, pathologically different. So, to go back to Lombroso, L'uomo delinquente was subsequently published in many different languages, and it very effectively pathologized the criminal. The key concepts underlying this pathology were social Darwinism, the social effects of Darwin, ideas about degeneration, about the possibility of the race degenerating backwards from its current state of progress, and atavism, an almost instant reversion to barbarism. Criminal man was therefore the project of biology, and therefore the project as well of psychiatry. The signs of crime were embedded in his organic structure, the shape of his head, physiology, tattoos. And of course psychiatry wasn't the only part of this project, but it was a major part in trying to debate the extent to which someone could be or couldn't be responsible for their behaviour.